You campaigned against rich people and you got enough envy whipped up in the country and you're gonna get it. You're gonna stick it to those rich people. But guess what? You may not get any more revenue. You may not get any more economic growth. But you can say, I stuck it to the rich people. I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from innocent Americans. The Fourth Amendment was what we fought the revolution over. John Adams said it was the spark that led to our war for independence, and I'm proud of standing for the Bill of Rights, and I will continue to stand for the Bill of Rights. The United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Many of those people deserve to be in prison. However, some of them do not. The thing is, I think vaccines are one of the greatest medical breakthroughs that we have. I'm a big fan and a great fan of the history of the development of the smallpox vaccine, for example. In our state, I'm really proud of the fact that the ones who overturned Jim Crow in Kentucky were Republicans fighting against an entirely unified Democrat Party. So I am proud to be Republican. I can't imagine being anything else. You can't have it both ways. You can't tell me that you're taxed enough already, and that you want constitutional government, and then in the next breath say, bring me home some bacon. The pig has been picked clean. The government has a history of not treating people fairly, from the internment of Japanese Americans in World War II to African Americans in the Civil Rights era. A free society will abide unofficial, private discrimination, even when that means allowing hate-filled groups to exclude people based on the color of their skin. I grew up in a family that despised not only communism but collectivism, socialism, and any ism that deprived the individual of his or her natural rights. There comes a time in the history of nations when fear and forgetfulness cause a nation to hesitate, to waver, and perhaps even to succumb. When that time comes, those who love liberty must rise to the occasion. Will you lovers of liberty rise to the occasion? I don't think it's hypothetical whether or not it's a good idea to topple secular dictators in the Middle East and hope to get a good outcome and hope that stability comes thereafter. The history of African American repression in this country rose from government-sanctioned racism. Jim Crow laws were a product of bigoted state and local governments. We must always embrace individual liberty and enforce the constitutional rights of all Americans, rich and poor, immigrant and native, black and white. My first choice had always been my father. He's still my first pick. Now that the nominating process is over, tonight, I'm happy to announce that I'm going to be supporting Governor Romney. Some libertarians argue that Western occupation fans the flames of radical Islam. I agree. But I don't agree that, absent Western occupation, that radical Islam goes quietly into that good night. Mandatory minimum sentencing has disproportionately affected blacks, Hispanics, and others who often don't have the financial means to fight back. I'm not questioning Dick Cheney's motives. There's a chance for a conflict of interest. At one point in time, he was opposed to going into Baghdad. Then he was out of office and involved in the defense industry, and then he became for going into Baghdad. Whether you breach the Fourth Amendment 20% of the time or 100% of the time, it's still not the point. The point is whether or not you still collect millions of people's information with a single warrant. In a free society, we will tolerate boorish people who have abhorrent behavior, but if we're civilized people, we publicly criticize them and don't belong to those groups or don't associate with those people. I think if you have a 2-story office and you hire someone who's handicapped, it might be reasonable to let him have an office on the first floor rather than the government saying you have to have a $100,000 elevator. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. There is something profoundly un-American about using the brute force of government to bully someone. As long as I sit at Henry Clay's desk, I will remember his lifelong desire to forge agreement, but I will also keep close to my heart the principled stand of his cousin, Cassius Clay, who refused to forsake the life of any human, simply to find agreement. The Constitution's pretty clear. The Federalist Papers are pretty clear. They very specifically delegated the power to declare war to Congress. They wanted this to be a congressional decision. They did not want war to be engaged in by the executive without approval of Congress. I think what happened during the Great Depression was that African Americans understood that Republicans championed citizenship and voting rights, but they became impatient for economic emancipation. Washington is horribly broken. We are encountering a day of reckoning, and this movement, this Tea Party movement, is a message to Washington that we're unhappy and that we want things done differently. What I've always said is that I'm opposed to institutional racism, and I would have, had I been alive at the time, I think, had the courage to march with Martin Luther King to overturn institutional racism, and I see no place in our society for institutional racism. You know, when Republicans were in charge, we doubled the debt. But now, our concern is the Democrats are in charge and they're tripling the debt. So, really, our concern is that we want smaller government. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.